Hello friends, and welcome to another episode of Team Jesus Outdoors. Hey guys, I got a really cool video for you today. Recently my son and I have been doing a ton of pattern testing. I mean, over the past year we have created a library of pattern testing targets. So anyway guys, with all this pattern testing that my son and I have been doing over the past year, it's provided us with a lot of answers to a lot of questions we had, but it's provided us with almost as many questions as it has answers. So I reached out to Jim Muller of Muller CHOKES and asked if we could do a short Zoom interview to get his opinion on some of the questions that all this pattern tested has generated in my mind. Jim was super cool. He agreed to spend some time with us doing a quick interview. And guys, Jim is one of the foremost ballistics experts right now in the country, maybe on the planet. Jim made a living in the aerospace manufacturing industry for a long time. He's a lifelong hunter. He's a master class sporting clays shooter, and he's a manufacturer of choke tubes. I could not even think of a better person to ask these questions of. So while we had this opportunity to talk to Jim, we got to ask him about the process of patterning. We got to ask him about choke geometry and why extended chokes are so much better than flush chokes, and why aftermarket chokes are so much better than factory chokes. So then that conversation led to a discussion of a few of my favorite Mossberg shotguns. And of course, no conversation with Jim would be complete without discussing margin of error. Much of Jim's philosophy about shotgunning choke tubes has to do with having the most margin of error you can have. So without further ado, let's get right to the interview here with Jim Muller of Muller CHOKES.
So basically what happens is, if you take a choke tube and you shoot paper at a given distance and that pattern looks small, we assume it's tight, it's going to be amazing on a duck at that distance, so we chalk it up as good. Then we take another choke tube and that same ammo and the same gun at the same distance, we fire it, and this pattern is larger, it's splotchy, it's got some holes in it, and we immediately consider it no good, and we walk away from it. Well, what we don't realize is how it's actually going to perform based on shot string length, shot to shot deviation. There's a lot of things that go into it, outer fringe, the core. So what I'm getting at is, when I started developing my chokes and testing different ammo, different guns, different chokes, I fired 12,000 rounds on paper, mud, water, live birds, clay targets, high-speed photography, videography. And what I learned was, more times than not, if I took a pattern that looked good on paper versus a pattern that maybe didn't look as good or was more open, and I went and shot a duck or a decoy or something on the water at a given yardage, a lot of times the pattern that looked bigger on paper and maybe not even as picture perfect as another one was explosive on that bird on the water. And when I shot birds in the air, they just blew up. But when I took the pattern that looked denser and smaller, considering as tighter, the shot string was way longer. I couldn't even kill a bird on the water at the same distance after multiple shots, because with a longer shot string, it's like a string of spaghetti or a torpedo that you're trying to lay on a bird. If you have a short shot string, it's like taking a pancake and dropping it on the bird all at once. It's explosive and the bird is dead. So even though you shot paper and the pattern may have looked a little splotchy or may have looked way too big in your eyes, it doesn't really mean it's true. You could be being entirely misled. And this is what you don't see on paper.
Along with shooting on paper, my other favorite way to test chokes is on clay.
Yep.
You know, I have easy access to sporting clay ranges, skeet ranges, trap ranges, and honestly, I shoot more of that than I do live birds anyway, right?
Yes.
We get to shoot clays 12 months out of the year. It's a little cold in January, but we get to shoot them.
Yep.
But I get to shoot birds a few times a year.
Absolutely.
So, my other favorite way to see what a choke is going to do is seeing it in the air on clays.
Yeah.
Hey, but while you brought up choke geometry, that brings up another thing that I've noticed, and I'm trying to make sense of it, trying to understand it. Maybe there's a scientific explanation for it. In every example, with every gun I've tested chokes with, in every manufacturer's chokes I've looked at, the flush fitting choke never shoots as well as the extended choke. Why is that?
Well, it's because in a nutshell, John, it's too short to funnel a shot string consistently. So over the years, when I developed my chokes, I created what's called GSPG, gun specific patterning geometry. And what I learned throughout all the pattern testing I did, if I took one gun and I changed every geometry you can imagine in the choke until I got the lowest shot deviation, the most even pattern on high-speed photography, on horizontal surfaces like water, mud, and also on paper counts on 24 quadrant paper. And then I took that same geometry and I put it in another gun. It was entirely different, right? But what I learned was that a choke had to be a certain length in a certain bore diameter to be able to put the right geometry in it, to be able to get it to be consistent, repeatable with low deviation. Okay. And I learned that there were only at the time, there was two chokes that were flush mount in the entire industry that were long enough where you could put the correct geometry in them to get them to pattern okay, right? Somewhat good enough to where you could deal with it or get by with it. But what I also learned was that when I got the right geometry in the choke at the right length, if I went shorter, the patterns became erratic with higher shot deviation. And it was accumulative. I mean, it went up really quick as I went shorter. It went from 10% to 20% to 50% to 80% deviation. Now, when I went longer, because when I immediately saw that, because I really wanted to go shorter because it's easier to machine, right? So when I started going longer, and when I say longer, I went in 1/2 inch increments all the way out to 6 inches on the extension length, meaning some guns had a 10-inch long choke in it. And what I learned was when I got the geometry correct at the right length, let's call it 3.5 inches overall length. If I went longer, it didn't get better, it just got tighter. So then as it got tighter, I started to change geometry and exit diameter to try to get it bigger again, which I achieved. But the percentage, the ballistic efficiency, and the shot-to-shot deviation didn't get any better than what it was at 3.5 inches, even though I was at 8 inches. So what it did was it just made it tighter. I had to keep changing things to get it more open. It didn't do anything. But when you went shorter, it got bad. And that is why flush mount chokes are not ultimate. They're just too short. And on top of that, 95% of the chokes that are out there in guns from the factory do not have the right geometry in them for the gun they're in.
You know, I've learned that factory chokes are just simply with one single exception, every factory choke that I've ever tested was garbage. I mean, I don't even pattern them anymore.
Yep.
I shoot mostly. I'm a big fan of Mossberg guns. I've got a couple Mossberg 20 gauges, a couple of Mossberg 12 gauge. My favorite gun is a Mossberg 930. That's where I run all the Muller chokes through it.
Yeah, it's a good gun.
I'm very, very happy. It's my favorite gun I've ever owned, honestly.
Yep, I shot a lot of rounds through a 930 that I got off of Mossberg. I actually owned my own gun club, and I was using the 930 to demo, and I was letting a lot of students use it. I was letting a lot of people that came there that didn't have a shotgun and they had to rent a shotgun. I had them use the 930. And I got to be honest with you, John, for a gun that's that inexpensive, I hardly ever cleaned that gun and it never malfunctioned and it cycled everything. You know, that's a lot to say about any gun, never mind one that's not top price, top tier level.
Yep. I also love my Remington 1187, although my 21-year-old boy's kind of claim that is his now.
Yep.
Which is fine.
Yep.
But I've noticed the same. I've noticed the exact same thing you're saying. I can go almost twice as long without cleaning my 930 as I can that 1187, or my Mossberg SA20.
Yeah.
My youngest uses an SA20, and I've got to clean that every 200 or 300 rounds. In my 930, I could probably get away with 400 or 500 rounds before I got to clean it.
Yeah. Yep. They do a good job. It's probably one thing that probably goes into that is the fact that Mossberg, last I understood from some surveys that were done, they actually are the top in regards to quantity. They're the top selling shotgun manufacturer in the world. They sell the most shotguns. And, I guess a lot of that has to do with home defense and military and law enforcement. They have so many models at so many price points. That's probably very attractive to a lot of people.
I think that's more of it, is that they seem to have hit that in whatever gun you're looking for. They've got something in the price point that's reliable.
Yep.
My first brand new shotgun was a Mossberg 500 pump.
Yep.
That thing was invincible. I cleaned that once every year or two, whether it needed it or not. Yeah, that gun was just invincible.
When
my home defense gun's a Maverick 88 12 gauge. I've tricked it a little bit for a good defensive gun, and that thing's just a machine, man. Just a fantastic gun.
When I was 10 years old, my dad bought me my first pump shotgun. I shot my first duck in 1975 with a Savage 311, Stevens 311 side by side 410, and I had hunted with a 410 from the age of 5 all the way until I was 10. And my dad bought me a Remington 870 Wingmaster 20 gauge, which I still have. And the first shotgun that I could buy with my own money was a Mossberg 500. And I shot the heck out of that. And my nephew actually still has that and still uses it, and it still works great.
Yep. Same with my Mossberg 500.
Yep.
I sold it to, when I decided in the early 90s that I wanted dedicated guns for different things instead of trying to use my 500 pump for everything.
Yep.
So I went to an over-under for clays. I went to a dedicated slug barrel Mossberg for my slug gun. I went to an 835 for my turkey gun. Right down the line with all my guns. So I sold my 500 pump to my brother-in-law, and it's his everything shotgun. And he still has it. He still has it today, 30 years later.
Yep.
He slaps a cantilevered slug barrel on it for deer season. He runs the factory 28-inch smooth bore for all his wing shooting. Yeah, those are just incredible guns. But my son's SA20, or my SA20 that my kid uses, something about that gun showed me how correct you were about something that you stated. that gun uses the mobile choke system.
Yes.
So, and that 20 gauge mobile choke is, fairly tight, fairly small diameter bore.
Yep.
And I've noticed with that thing that my kid always wants to run a tight choke. And I've had to convince him to open that thing up.
Yes.
That tight bore just seems to like an open choke a lot better.
Yes.
I got him down to an IC.
Yep.
I got him down to an IC for everything.
Good.
But one of these days we're going to pick him up a U1 or a U0.
Yes.
And I think his shot percentage is going to go up.
Yes. A lot of people over choke and they don't realize how much they're handicapping themselves. Too many people out there think that they're all world champion shooters, I guess, because they listen to world champion shooters that do not miss the close targets. They make their money and they make their wins on the 65, 70-yard targets. And, or I should say targets that are, at the outer limits. Sometimes they're 50 yards and sometimes they're 90 yards. But the top shooters are making their money and making their targets that help them win on the really far targets. They're not making it on the ones that are inside 30. The ones inside 30, world champions, national champion, professional shooters are not going to miss close targets. They just don't. And if they do, it's a rarity, right? Very rare. So shooting a tight choke for them, it's fine, right? It's like Tiger Woods playing golf, right? So he could probably golf lower scores with, a 5-iron if he used it on the whole golf course than good people would using the right clubs on the whole course, right? So what happens is a lot of people are basically not anywhere near the level of the people that are recommending shooting tight chokes. And the people that are recommending it don't really understand the handicap that people that are not at that level are being introduced to with a tight choke. So I've done a lot of testing in my shooting with score, and I've done a lot of testing with students and a lot of testing with friends and colleagues and fellow hunters and fellow sporting clay competitors. And I've done a lot of testing, and I have proven undoubtedly that people over choke and it hurts their score. And the same thing happens in the duck blind or the pheasant field. It undoubtedly. So people really need to pay attention to that.
I'm not afraid to admit that I'm not a master class shooter. I'm just a ham and egger.
Yep.
I enjoy doing it. I'm not competing. I'm competing against my two sons because if they beat me, then I hear about it for days. but I'm not worried about competition. So I'm going to take the biggest margin of error that you can give me.
Yep. And that's something I've always taught people. Like, we're using a shotgun because, it's a scatter gun, right? Scatter guns and shotguns. But the reason we use a shotgun to shoot a moving target is because of margin of error. And the reason that we want margin of error is because the target's moving. So if we're using a shotgun to give us margin of error because the target's moving, then why would we not want the largest margin of error we could possibly get in using that shotgun? And this is something that's been lost over decades of bad teaching and false myth information. So this is something I'm trying to help people with again and get them back to what shotgunning can be and what it's supposed to be.
I'm starting to understand the whole bigger bore, more payload thing.
Yep.
Like I said, I've got a Mossberg 835, and that's a giant bore, 777 bore.
Yep. 10 gauge. Yep.
and trying to choke that thing down for, you know, turkey patterning. It's, you know, it's tough, but
Yeah, well, the so-called turkey chokes that are out there on the market, you just hit the nail on the head with what you just said. If you take a 777 bore 12 gauge, which is actually a 10 gauge bore, a Browning BPS, a Browning Gold 10, a Rem 10, you know, Remington SP 10, those barrel bore diameters measure 777. So a Mossberg 835 935 Ultimag truly is a 10 gauge bore on a 12 gauge gun. And if you take that and you compare it to, let's say, a Beretta Mobile Choke 12 gauge, which averages 720, that is 57 thousandths of an inch different before you even introduce choke. So what that means is you have to choke the 835, 935 bore down a lot more to get it to shoot tight. But with that said, you have to have the right geometry to do so. And you don't have to choke it as much as people do. What happens is they choke it down like they go from a garden hose down to a straw, and they think it's going to shoot a tight pattern. It's not. You're going to blow the pattern. It's going to be tremendous forces funneling down. Shot's going to come out like a spray hose. So people that make choke tubes, people that make shotguns, it doesn't mean that they know how to make a choke tube. It just means that they make it and they put it in the gun and they call it a full choke because it's constricted like a full choke. Doesn't mean it's going to shoot that way. So this is something that I do a lot different than anybody else.
the UFO choke that you make for the 835, what's roughly the exit diameter of that?
I believe it's around 720.
Okay, okay.
With
tried-
with the correct geometry.
I've tried choking that all the way down to 670, and that was way too tight. That did, and all I shoot in that gun is Winchester XR.
Yeah, yeah,
Winchester
long beard.
Yeah,
Yep.
I shoot Longbeard XR number 6s. That I went through a lot. You know, I tried all kinds of turkey ammo, and that's the only thing I run through it now is 3-inch Longbeard XR number 6s.
Yep.
Like I said, I tried choking it as far down as tight as 670, and then I started working my way back. And,
Yep.
And right now I'm shooting a 700. I believe it's a 700, and it's actually, this is the one example of a factory choke that I like. It's the Mossberg AccuMag
Yes.
extra full turkey choke.
Yep.
It's an extended factory choke. And with the less constriction, I find that shoots better than all of the typical turkey chokes I've tried in it.
Yep. It's exactly true.
At too tight of constrictions.
Yep. And
it kicks a little bit less.
yeah. And you know that, and then these are the things people don't understand, John, and this is why I'm spending so much time trying to educate and teach people, because I've done it, you know.
Hey, well, I've already held you longer than I promised to have you on the phone.
Oh, that's all right, John.
I won't hold you up all afternoon, but I sure do appreciate you helping me understand some of these things.
Yep. And really quick, we wanted to touch base on velocity, right?
Yes, sir.
So velocity is definitely not your friend. You're not shooting a single projectile. You're shooting a bunch of BBs. A lot of times the BBs are not perfectly uniform. A lot of times, the BBs can get deformed. And if they don't deform, you're getting tremendous pressures going through the choke. So, like Newton's third law of physics, the faster it starts out, the faster it slows down, and the faster it spreads out. So if you start to shoot shotgun patterns, regardless of pellet material, obviously different pellet materials are affected more than others, but they're all affected. The moment you exceed 1,250 feet per second, things really start to vary greatly. Now, there's a lot of loads out there that are 1,300 and they work good. There's a lot of loads out there that are 1,350. They work pretty good. But if they were 1,160 or even 1,200, they would work a lot better. And, you know, not only pattern wise and efficiency, but also distance. You know, if you shoot a load that's 1,500 feet per second at 60 yards, and you take that same exact choke and ammo combo and scale it down to 1145, at 1145 feet per second at that same distance, your pattern is so much denser, so much tighter, and so much more consistent and uniform. It's mind blowing. So I always teach people, if you have a really far target, or if you're shooting really far targets, the best thing to do is make sure you're starting out with a slower ammo, not faster. And it's also important to shoot the same velocity all the time, so everything is always the same. And you know, my rule of thumb is always stay below 1,300.
Well, that's why I selected the ammos that I've selected. To try for this year's goose season was I took advice that I've heard from you on other podcasts, and I mean, right, what I'm seeing right now, I mean, the top two recommendations that you gave are the two boxes I plan to have in my bag this fall.
Yep.
That Remington Nitro Steel at 1275 is just, I mean, we're seeing beautiful patterns with that.
Yep.
The Winchester Drylock at 1,300 is pretty darn close.
Yep.
And then in the 3-inch, I can't find anything under 1,300. But
no,
that
you
Remington,
won't.
that high-speed Remington at 1,300, that did pretty fair also.
Yeah. Yep. All good loads. You know, so it's just a matter of playing around and testing the lower velocity with the higher payload. You know, all these people testing all this light payload ammo and saying a lot of things like, oh, the lighter payload gave me better percentages than the heavier payload. And then you find out that, you know, the distance they're patterning at or the way that they're doing the pellet percentages just doesn't calculate right. But if you shoot birds, you're going to see a huge difference. You know, I always teach people pellets are what break the target or kill the birds, not air. So if you could have more pellets in the same exact shell, why not have it?
Is there any advantage to 2 3/4 over the 3-inch shell since you have the smaller payload?
So hull length or shell length doesn't mean anything. What matters is the payload and what's in it. So if you have a 2 3/4 inch shell that's 1.25 ounces, and you have a 3.5 inch 10 gauge shell that's 1.25 ounces, it's going to be the same thing provided it's the same velocity. You know, not to get into the bore diameters and choke, but as far as physics, 1.25 ounces is 1.25 ounces. It doesn't matter what hull length it's coming out of. So
Right, that makes sense.
What a lot of ammo companies do is, let's say it's like a Remington Nitro Steel. They put 1.25 ounces in a 2 3/4 inch hull, which is the most you could fit in there in steel, and they push that only 1275. It's going to pattern phenomenal because of the components, the amount of pellets, and the velocity. If you take that same thing, a lot of companies, they'll put in 3-inch or 3.5 inch. They leave it at 1.25 ounces. So all they do is they put spacers in and they put more powder in, give them more velocity, and they start, you know, marketing hyper velocity kills and speed killed slogans. The only thing speed kills is your shoulder, your neck, your wallet, and your pattern. It doesn't kill birds.
Well, hey, I'll tell you what. I will let you get back to your afternoon, and hopefully you get out fishing tomorrow.
Yep. We'll be going fishing or going to shoot some sporting clays, one or the other.
I envy you. I'll be at the office tomorrow wishing I was in your shoes.
All
Well, hey,
right,
thanks
John.
again. I'll be in touch.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Well, hey friends, I hope that you've enjoyed listening to Jim half as much as I do, because I could listen to Jim talk all day long. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you'll click that like button. I hope you're subscribed. And friends, do me a favor and go over and check out our other channel, TJL Men's Ministries. Over there we talk about the Word of God, we talk about our faith in Christ, and whether you're a new believer, a long-time believer, or you're just exploring how faith fits into your life, I think there's something over there that you might find interest in. Fellas, God bless, tight lines. We'll see you in the woods, we'll see you on the water.